morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and also on the web at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from River Cities Community Access. RCCA Media are here, digitally recording our broadcast for later airing on your favorite public access channel on your cable system or online at rcca.org, I believe. But
CCAmedia.org.
RCCAmedia.org. Thank you. That's Mayor Zach Vruwink, and that's why they're here, because the phone lines will be open today, and we're going to take your questions for his honor. But right now, I wanted to pass along, because I just got off the phone with Phil Hartley over at Verso Papers. There's been a whole bunch of confusion about a story that broke on the Associated Press about Verso yesterday, and it involves a possible quote-unquote closing of mills. Here's the latest from Phil Hartley. Verso is considering restructuring of some of its debt. Because of that, because they're a public company, they have to announce that they're looking at doing this. This is something down the road. Part of that may involve the sale of some mills. The only one affected in our area would be Stevens Point. But again, there's been no decision about this. This is just a public announcement that they are looking at this. And long term, there's been no decision. There's no mills being closed. So everybody take a deep breath. and I told Phil I would get on the air today and kind of clarify things. And you know, in this town, how rumors can start and spread, and before you know it, hey, Verso's closing everything.
Well, we know how delicate the industry is, right? There's no secret. Obviously, they released their SEC filings, their Securities and Exchange Commission filings on Monday morning. And, in those is where they sort of hinted at some of those restructuring questions. And, in an industry like that where, the mergers and acquisitions are kind of the norm, they are straddled, as Phil had said, with a lot of debt. And, at some point, you've got to make good on those obligations. It's just like a homeowner that has a mortgage or any other debt obligations. The paper company is no different. We're very fortunate to have, the mills and the integrated operations with the craft and the pulp paper operations with our paper making here, because you're seeing with a lot of these mills the fact that if they're not integrated, they're at a disadvantage. There's a cost disadvantage because they have to truck all of that raw material in, and so we're very fortunate to have their operations here. I'm very close in conversation with their mill manager on a regular basis, and he's new to the community and really invested in the community, which is great. In fact, his wife opened a business in Wisconsin Rapids, and so they're definitely invested in sort of the future of Wisconsin Rapids, which is great to see, right? To see not only putting their money where their mouth is, or even where their house is, which is really kind of a cool thing.
Okay, well, let's talk about money. The city adopted or had the public hearing on its 2016 city budget. So what can you tell us about what taxpayers are going to be facing this year?
Sure. Well, a couple of comments on the budget. As we've talked on your show on different occasions, sort of the constraints in which cities and other municipalities have to work under in the preparation of their annual budget. As a finance director said yesterday when we talked with another member of the media on the subject of the budget, in his years of budget preparation, this is definitely one of the most constraining years in terms of our preparation for two reasons. We obviously have levy limits, and levy limits are imposed on us by the state. And under the 2015-2017 state budget, the levy process and formula didn't change much, but it's obviously it's actually tied to the percentage increase in equalized value from net new construction. And we know that in 2014, which is what our net new construction numbers are based off of, the previous calendar year, that in 2014 we had not a lot of net new construction, and net new construction obviously is also subtracting the demolition or reduction in property in that area as well. So our allowable increase to our budget, just based on net new construction alone, was $46,000. And if you offer wage increases, as we did through our negotiations with our bargaining units, police and fire, that $46,000 doesn't even cover a fraction of the wage increases and the roll-ups that happen. And then there's also the program called expenditure restraint, and that is intended in the same way levy limits is to control the growth of budgets in local government. And expenditure restraint is really a carrot for municipalities to limit their growth in spending. So under that program this year, and that's a really kind of a convoluted formula to arrive at the number, we actually qualify. The expenditure restraint qualification and the dollar amount we receive is $450,000. So we certainly want to qualify for expenditure restraint, or we're going to have to come up with that $457,000 somewhere else. And the total allowable increase to that was 0.6%. The other percentage was 0.025%. So really, really small numbers. So our expenditure, total general fund, the general fund of our budget, could not exceed $104,000 of an increase. So we had to do our due diligence to reduce costs and expenditures in other areas to be able to make good on the promises and commitments we had made in things like wage increases in other areas. So all that said, we actually had to look at areas like health insurance. It's a big cost driver for everyone, private sector and public sector. So we were able to consider changes to our health insurance funding for our health savings accounts, which offset some of the other increases. So we are settling on to the question of what's the picture going to look like on the tax bill when they receive them in December. That we did manage to prepare a very small increase, a budget with a very small increase in our tax levy, as well as in our tax rate. In our tax levy, a 0.8%, so under a 1% increase in our tax levy, as well as a 1.1% in our tax rate, which is smaller than last year's, our 2015 tax rate, and the smallest when compared to other taxing jurisdictions in our area, which would be the state, the county, the technical college, and the school district, which each had 1.6, 1.6, 1.6, and the school district having the most increase, and that's a 2.3% increase. So all things said, the city really did its due diligence this year to make sure that we could have the smallest manageable increase in our tax levy as well as our tax rate, which of course is driven by the two mentions that I made, which was levy limits and expenditure restraint. So all those constraints aside, and all that said, we've got a very small increase in our tax rate and tax levy.
What's going to be the tax rate that people will pay? The
tax rate, I actually don't know if I've got that in front of me. But it's 0.8% increase in the previous mill rate. So
okay.
It's I think. I don't have the number right in front of me.
Okay. You were able to keep it down as small as possible. Where did you have to make some painful cuts because of that?
Well, there were a couple of adjustments that were gifts, I would say, and that would be in the area of our workman's comp, where we actually had a reduction due to a rate classification. And I'm sorry, that was an increase in that area, but there was a rate decrease in the Wisconsin retirement system. The Wisconsin retirement system, as we know, is very solvent and a very, very high-performing program around the country. It's actually regarded as one of the top retirement systems because of their prudent financial decisions. And there was a decrease of $24,000 in the city's contribution to the Wisconsin retirement system for folks in that system. As well as we made a reduction to our HSA contributions, our health savings account contributions that we would contribute to our employee accounts. We reduced that from previous budget year of $244,000. Because when you take a look at the other cost increases that I mentioned, wage increases, which were $185,000, we did have a health insurance cost just to the premium, $102,000 increase to our budget, as well as $17,000. So that totaled a $304,000 of pre-committed, we'll call them, expenditure increases, where we had to find ways to offset that when you take into account the limited ability for us to raise our tax levy that we talked about. So really a delicate situation all around, but we're able to manage it, and so there are no furloughs, no layoffs in this budget, as well as I've committed to in previous budgets, and I'm glad the council carried that forward last night. The budget did pass unanimously in an 8-0 vote, which I'm very pleased that the council had entrusted city staff and myself in the preparation of that budget. And there's a lot of projects and priorities that are outstanding that were not funded through the budget because we couldn't fund them through the budget. So we're going to begin the process now of trying to find creative ways to finance those things. There were some street maintenance activities that we need to do because of, let's say, our connecting highways, 34, 13, 54, 73, all of which have an annual maintenance expectation. But when our state aids have been flat or declining, we've been able to do less of that. So we're going to be finding creative ways to finance things like that into next year.
What kind of creative ways?
Well, sometimes you can look for grant opportunities, but for us, it's trying to find more efficiencies within our processes. And if you can improve the efficiency of your construction program, for example, any number of %, you can reallocate those dollars that would have been spent in the construction process to other activities. Okay. So, the challenge for us is, we've got a great labor force in the street department and public works, but we can't afford a lot of contract labor, so we have to really find ways to do the work ourselves. And good years like this year, when the weather was great, our season of maintenance was much longer than other years. So we've got to find ways to be able to do that work when the season is right, as well as when we've got the staff to do so.
In other words, we'll do it ourselves rather than contracting it out.
Right. Our budget couldn't afford any contract payments or any growth in that, as we've done in previous years.
That leads into something I read in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on Sunday. In the main news section, an article from Bloomberg News, which for folks who are unfamiliar is mainly a financial news source. It's one of the main business news sources. Philanthropy playing a bigger role in cities.
Yes.
And they talked about Flint, Michigan, and I'm reading the article, and they mentioned Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink.
Yeah. It was interesting to get a call from a reporter from Bloomberg on the subject. I thought, well, why Wisconsin Rapids of all the cities in the country?
Well, they mentioned the Tribune Building project. And they had something with Flint and needed their Flint, Michigan needing, I think, water improvement and the like. And there were people talking of the pros and cons of this approach, but I'd be interested in getting your thoughts. One person says, well, this is because of this dysfunction of government. Private sources or philanthropic sources are having to pick up the tab for stuff that government should be doing, and it's not sustainable, and in the long run, it's not too healthy. Your thoughts? I don't know if you read the whole article, but your thoughts about that?
Well, it's really come as a result of the pledges that elected officials have made when they ran for state government in all of these states, like Michigan, where they had a large change in sort of their direction and approach to taxes. And when you say you're not going to raise taxes, that's fine and dandy, but you have to also live with the consequences of not raising government expenditures, right? And so you do the same as you do in previous years, and as costs increase, you do less as you did in previous years, right? Because the cost of doing business, whether it's wage increases as we've talked about, or the contract payments, contractors are typically, their costs don't stay the same year after year. So when you say you're not going to raise taxes, the consequences of that are you're able to do less than you were in previous years. Now, I like to say, okay, we're trying to find ways to find waste and to eliminate some of the spending in other areas to yet put to new initiatives. And so the writer, asked the question about where have we experienced in our city. Well, we've got a long-standing support with things like the Riverview Hospital Association, supporting things in our fire department with turnout gear and some of the equipment that they need to provide the service to the community. Typically, one would say that's a government function, and it's a public entity, and so they should finance it themselves. But we've had to look to these other sources because the dollars aren't there, and so if you can't increase increase your budget, you can't spend new money on these initiatives. You have to find other sources of revenue. And so we're in constant conversations with any of the 5 foundations, whether it's the Riverview Hospital, Aspirus Riverview Hospital, I guess it's called now, Hospital Foundation, Encourage, the newly forming Legacy Foundation, the Woodtrust Bell Foundation, or even the Meade-Witter Foundation. Just recently, the Meade-Witter Foundation helped finance the clock and bell tower improvements.
I was just noticing, I was going to ask you about that. Okay, there's another example
of where philanthropy is playing a greater role in local government. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I always like to think as government expenditures being a portion of the ultimate financing picture, and that's kind of what I had stated in the article. Others would disagree. I mean, there were disagreements, and they're saying, well, the government should be picking up the full tab on these things. That's why we pay taxes. Well, but if your elected officials are committing to not increase taxes, that's fine, but you're going to have to find somewhere else to pick up the last mile, if you will, of what some of these costs are.
Well, this is the conundrum that we've been in for our country and for our local municipalities, cities, whatever. Everybody does. I want my taxes kept low.
Right.
I don't want increases. Government needs to get smarter with its money. It should cut wasteful spending. I want my services.
Right, and back to the beginning of the cycle again. Yeah. And we've seen it in the library. The Meade-Witter Foundation has been a tremendous partner of the library, as have other community benefactors, in recognizing that government can only take us so far. That there's only so many materials, and the dollar can only go so far. So if we're going to help improve literacy rates or improve some of these other things, philanthropy can play a unique role, I would say, in trying to change that and even pilot certain things. Because government, in government, you want to go the sure bet. You want to make sure that those tax dollars are not wasted, right? So your creativity and your innovation is not there because you're not incentivized. If you have a failure, you've wasted that money in some people's eyes as opposed to trying different things. So philanthropy can play a role in helping to try new things and new efforts in that regard.
I'm going to open up the phone lines if you'd like to talk to the mayor this morning, 715-424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. We'll get you on the air with the mayor. Dave Batten, the city treasurer, is going to be ending is retiring at the end of June?
No, Dave Batten retired already.
He did. Okay, he retired. Yeah. Why was that kept so low-key?
We talked about it on your show.
I know.
Yeah, he retired the end of June last year already.
Right.
So I think maybe you're referring to the retirement or the resignation of the city clerk.
Yeah. Okay. But there's been some confusion. People are wondering what's going on with City Hall with some of these positions, and then I got a charter ordinance.
Okay,
but,
sure.
But we got a caller for you. So let's get to the phone lines. And again, 424-2600 pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Carl. Good morning, Mayor Vruwink.
Good morning.
Got a question for you, or kind of a problem. What is your take on the zoning zoning rules being enforced in the city? I know we've got Ray Starks as our zoning enforcement guy, and I have contacted him. And Ray, I have no complaint. He's very, very polite and everything. But there's just a lot of things that even right in our neighborhood here that has been going on for a long time, and nothing, we got a guy who's supposed to be enforcing these, but nothing seems to be getting done. And also, I guess, too, Mayor, I did contact you by email and mail and even a phone call, and I didn't receive a response. I don't know what your policy is on communicating with the citizens, but I wasn't real happy about that.
Sure.
But I'll get off the phone.
You want to talk about specifically what items you're concerned about in your neighborhood?
Yeah. A couple of them. One, I guess, I'm not talking about some paint falling off in a house or something like that. I'm talking about one of the big things that you see all over the city going up are these, you buy them at Menards or something, these tarp. They got a metal framing, and they got a tarp on them. People store whatever in them. Well, Ray told me that technically these are violating city code, but yet they're going up all over the place. That's one. And the other thing, I guess, is just general yard maintenance. People got trees down in their yard and grass that's, a foot high, and nothing's been done. So
Okay.
So that was the specific issue that you're concerned
and
about.
Cars.
And
The other one,
cars.
people parking cars in their yards.
Yeah.
In this neighborhood, there's been cars parked. There's in yards. It's been sitting there, and nothing. Why isn't that stuff being enforced? Is what I'd like to know.
Okay.
And we shouldn't have to complain. The citizens shouldn't. I mean, we got a zoning guy. He drives around, and now when you complain, you're the bad guy in the neighborhood.
Well, okay. Well, definitely like to address your concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Does this get into about the reworking of our zoning regulations that we've talked about?
To a point. So there's the zoning code, which typically addresses development and any new development or property. And then there's also the property maintenance code. So the gentleman, just to be clear, the gentleman's referring to the code enforcement officer, which would be Ray Starks. Ray enforces the code and the code violations that he might find or that are on a complaint basis. But there's also the zoning code. So there's two aspects. There's two separate schools of thought that we want to keep separate because they are. The zoning code has its purpose, and there's a project happening underway to update our zoning code to foster better development and more modern code to develop in the area of development. As far as the code question goes, the way the gentleman asked the question, first, if the resident asks for a response, I will respond. Oftentimes, residents write anonymous letters. I get many of those, and if folks want a response, of course, I do respond. Now, if it's a issue though in this particular situation on a code violation, I have no more power than Ray has. So for residents to say, I'm going to call the mayor, and the mayor is going to get rid of the wood pile that's an eyesore next door on my neighbor's property, the mayor has no power to do that, right? But I can tell and direct Ray to take a second look at issues. I've done that on numerous occasions. But Ray only has the ability of the ordinance to work within. Ray can't just write a citation because someone wants a citation written. Or Ray can't, issue the lawnmowers to go out and mow the neighbor's lawn because the weeds are too tall. There is a process, a due process, in which we give our residents to remedy or to cure a violation. So and Ray works as admittedly on a complaint basis. Oftentimes there are things that he discovers on his own, but he doesn't drive a route looking for code violations. They're on a complaint basis. So to the resident's point of he's the bad guy in the neighborhood, I'm sorry, in 151 street miles and 8,000 parcels, one guy isn't going to be able to look around and observe every code violation. In fact, it's probably more inefficient than him working on a complaint basis.
Okay, let's get back to our phone calls. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine with the mayor. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. Yes, on the same regards to what the caller was talking about for as far as violations and having Ray come over and et cetera. We had about a year and a half ago expressed concern that we had the same issue with a unregistered vehicle full of stuff in a van behind a house, and Ray had come over a couple different times to be able to view it, talk with the homeowner, and still nothing has been taking place on it. And I guess I just want your thoughts about this because we bring it to the attention of the proper channels and take it through the system, and there's still no resolution to it. So I'll hang up and wait for your comments.
Okay, thank you for the call. Now, before we go to break, why don't you answer that one?
It shouldn't happen. I guess, the reality is if Ray had been involved and there was a violation, a true violation that exists, a parked vehicle, unlicensed vehicle, whatever the situation might be, it should be remedied. That's a simple, straightforward answer. Now, I'm not sure in the situations that the residents have raised, I think it'd be helpful for me to know the property addresses in which the violation occurs because we have a database to know exactly how much contact Ray has had. had and what the result was. Now, there was Alderperson Firke raised a point, and I think if you have concerns, he's one that cares deeply about this issue, that if we're investing in an ordinance control officer, do we have the teeth in the rules to be able to get the remedies? And oftentimes Ray says we don't, and so that's where Ray isn't getting resolution. So I think this is an issue that was just raised, I believe, at our last city council, not last night, the previous city council meeting, where Alderperson Firke said he'd like this issue looked into, and if we're going to invest in a full-time ordinance control officer, that person should have the teeth to be able to, in the violations, to be able to remedy them. And I fully agree.
We got to take our first break. I want our callers to stay on the line. We got one caller punched up. Stay on the line. We're going to pay the bills, and then we'll be right back with more of the Morning Magazine.
Good morning, and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of today's show on AM 1320 on WFHR.com. Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here for the entire program, and the phone lines are open at 715-424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone to get you, to give you the chance to talk with the mayor. And we have a caller patiently waiting, so you're up next, and you're on the air with Mayor Vruwink. Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you. I called in just prior to your commercial, and one of the things the mayor commented on was the specifics to an address or whatever due to this van being unregistered. And if you've got a pen handy, Mayor, I've got an address for you.
Okay, great.
And the address is 2430 3rd Avenue South.
Okay. As I was telling Carl, we've got a database, and we can certainly see what the history was on it, and I've got access to that and can see it firsthand.
You should have enough history to make a novel. So,
okay. Well, that should be good.
Do you have any other questions from me?
I don't. Nope, that helps. We should have your information if you had generated the original complaint as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Bye-bye. And let's move down the line to our next caller. You're up next with Mayor Vruwink.
Yes, I have 2 items. One is the roundabout that was supposed to be or was going to be built by Domino's. I see they've moved out of there now. Is that still on the table, or is there something else?
No decision has been made whether there's going to be a roundabout there. In fact, they just held a an open house on Tuesday night at City Hall for all the property owners. They went block by block and invited property owners to be present in that area. And I asked the question myself. I said, when are we going to know whether or not the roundabout is a viable option for that intersection? And they figured in the next 6 months, when they go through the design, they'll be exploring the 2 alternatives. One, to rebuild it as a normal intersection as we see it today, or 2, if there's a roundabouts. But no decision's been made. In fact, that's unfortunately misinformation that's floated through the community that there will be a roundabout. Domino's chose to move on their own accord, not because of any future reconstruction on that corridor.
All right, and the other thing is the ambulance situation, the route they take.
Mm-hmm.
That's come up, I think.
Right. Yeah, and I've talked to the chief about it, and there hasn't been any action on behalf of the chief on the issue. I know he did say that he was going to talk with his group about the preferred routes and see what their opinions were, because they do want some discretion, as I was told, to be able to take the route that they feel is going to be the fastest and the safest. But as far as any formal action, the city council has not taken any action on that particular subject.
So what committee does that come up on?
That would probably come up on Finance and Property.
Finance and Property? Mm-hmm. Is that committee met this month?
They will meet in December. The first.
December.
All committees will meet the first Tuesday in December. Mm-hmm.
First Tuesday in December? All right.
And Alderperson Dolan is the chair of that committee.
What was that?
Alderperson Dolan, Terry Dolan.
Dolan, okay.
Yeah, is the chairperson of the Finance and Property Committee.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, if you want to bring that up, you can contact the chairman and say, I would like the committee to discuss this item.
Right. Yep.
And you make a referral.
Staff typically, and if there's a referral or a necessary agenda item, then they'll put it on the agenda.
Okay. That might be something to bring the chief in sometime and talking how they go about doing that. we're talking about, okay, we got the city treasurer, we got the city clerk, and the city clerk, there's a charter ordinance. Did it get adopted?
So it was the first reading of the charter ordinance.
Okay.
And what Carl's referring to for our listeners is a referral that Alderperson Stack made at a committee of the whole at the end of October to change the office of city clerk from elected to an appointed office. The current seated clerk announced his resignation about a month and a half ago, I believe it was, and he had indicated that he will be vacating the position in December. And has taken other opportunities taken other opportunities on. So at this point, the charter ordinance did not pass last night, but it will come back as is the process.
What was the vote?
Reading actually 4-4. It was a split vote last night on that.
Okay, so...
And because it requires a 6 of 8, a supermajority to pass a 2/3, of course there's no tie necessary to be broken in that situation.
Okay, so then what if this idea of this reorganization to turn it into an appointed office is rejected, what happens?
Then the sort of outstanding item is for the mayor to appoint a new clerk, and the new clerk then would be considered by the city council just like any other appointment process would happen.
Is that what you did with Batten's position, or?
Well, Batten, so similar process, yeah. Batten advocated heavily for the removal of that as an elected position and to convert it to an appointed position, and so when Batten retired the middle of this last year and announced really even at the end of last year that he would plan to do this, he committed to converting that from an elected to an appointed position, recognizing that as an officer of the city, there's no political aspect to the job of the treasurer's position. It's managing investments and collecting taxes, that there is no political discretion that one has in that position. And really the manner of selection of an elected position, he felt and others felt that there was a risk to the taxpayers or to the citizens in the sense that you really need somebody qualified to manage investments. You need someone qualified and knows sort of the tax collection process and all of that. So that position then was rolled within the finance department with some other reorganization in that department.
Okay. So I guess the idea, why make this an unelected position in your mind?
Well, the debate that the council had last night was there are really two schools of thought. One, to keep it as an elected position, that the voters like to select their city clerk. And what's interesting is we are one of 14 cities in the state to still elect a city clerk, and it makes sense. Originally when we went to a democracy and republic to create the charter to create cities and municipalities, there was some question about the political nature maybe of a city clerk and the role that they play in the community. Now, over time, since that time has passed, the state has really dictated how city clerks operate in the form of elections, as well as how they give beverage operator licenses out and liquor licenses. And so in that period of time, we've seen, if residents are interested, the 175 cities around the state have gone to an appointed clerk in some form or some fashion. And so that's really the discussion of the one side of the debate is let's keep the voters to select that position. The other school of thought is because it's not a political position, much like the treasurer's position, it's an officer of the city. There are administrative functions that are required, that the position should be appointed. And so that's where Jim Stack and the others that advocated for that and the bringing of the charter ordinance. So the challenge for me is ultimately I'm going to appoint somebody to fill that position, and that person should know whether or not they're going to have to seek election or not. And if they're going to have to seek election, I may not get as many candidates interested in the position, so the city council decided they wanted to get that remedied before an appointment was considered to fill the vacancy of the city clerk.
Okay, so this will come back next month?
Come back next month. Mm-hmm.
And if it were to pass, then there is a process where people can petition for a referendum, correct?
Right, mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. My,
and I believe that the process, unfortunately, would be too late then for the spring election, so it would happen in the fall, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Or in the next year. I don't know exactly when the nonpartisan.
But I can't remember where we've had like a contested city clerk. election. Most of the times, elected city clerk runs unopposed.
It's uncommon. Yeah, I mean, it's as common for the unopposed as was with our city council seats, right? We had a number of unopposed city council seats the last time.
I wanted to get to that. It's a nice segue, Your Honor. District 1 aldermanic vacancy.
Interesting process. Did you watch the meeting last night?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so did you get to this part of the meeting?
I was probably getting ready for bed.
Yeah, we went kind of late last night, not super late, but so Alderperson Worrell, who represents the district we're sitting in here today, announced his resignation effective November 30th, and so he's stepping down. And because
is he moving out of the city?
No, he's remaining in the city, and he said after some hard discussions and deliberations that he decided that he had served a bit of time on the council. I think he was elected, if I'm not mistaken, in 2009 to the city council, and as I told him, served us very, very well. I mean, he's been a great partner, and I think really elevated the challenges in his district regarding neighborhood cleanup and community policing, and he's really done an admirable job in his role as alderman. So he, in the process to fill that position, on the council agenda last night was their discussion on how they wanted to fill. That's not a mayoral appointment, that's a council appointment. In the process of the vacancy, a couple of things had to be done. They had to decide if they wanted a special election in the spring of next year to fill the 1 year that would be remaining in Chad's current term or in that District 1 term. There's also whether or not they wanted to waive the special election. They could have said, nope, we're going to appoint someone to fill the remainder of the term. And after a lengthy discussion, back and forth, I think everyone participated nearly on the council on this subject. They decided to actually appoint someone that had expressed interest in the position to fill a 5-month vacancy, so to fill a vacancy between now and the spring election, to give folks in District 1 the opportunity to run for the seat as they would in a general election. And so they selected, so they made the motion, and it was a tie vote. So on a tie vote, I had known the interested individual, as did at least 4 of the members on the city council, or they wouldn't have supported him, and felt that he was a worthy fit for 5 months, and he'd have to run for the position if he wanted it after April of 2016, just like anybody else from that district. And it's been, I think...
Who's the individual?
Lee Tao. And so Lee will be, it was, I think, a historic moment for the city council, and very pleased to have, and proud to have cast the tie vote for the first Hmong individual to serve on our city council. I believe strongly, as I mentioned last night, in representative democracy. I think our city council, with all white males today, is probably not representative of our community. And so I said, if there's somebody else representing, some other variety of our community in terms of race or ethnicity, I think it's a great thing. And to see Lee's interest, I had understood that Lee had considered seeking the position in the past, but for some reason didn't end up on the ballot, and so I think he'll be a good temporary replacement for Chad on the council to fill the vacancy in District 1 for 5 months, and then anybody wishing to seek that position can do so starting in 2 weeks to pull papers around.
I was going to say, we're at that time, since we're talking elections, and when can folks start taking out nomination papers?
December 1st, and they have to turn them back in, I believe, the 4th or so of January, the first Monday in January.
Okay, so I might as well ask you, you're up for re-election, right?
I am up for re-election.
Are you going to be running, do you want to keep this job, or are you moving on?
Yeah, I plan to seek re-election. There are a number of initiatives underway, from property acquisition to our efforts to strengthen neighborhoods, as well as to grow and to draw business to the community. And I feel that in my tenure, we've started a lot of those initiatives, but we haven't gotten to a point where I feel good about stepping aside from them, and so I intend to seek re-election in the spring.
Okay, and obviously, if there's another person runs against you, if there's more than one challenger, we'd have to have a primary, or is that
correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there would be a primary, as would in the four. There'll actually be 5 city council seats now.
Well, let's hopefully we get some candidates.
I agree. It's healthy. It's healthy to have candidates seek office because you have a debate and a dialogue, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so if you're interested, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from the Encourage Community Foundation with their usual election time workshop, how to run for public office.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so, if you're interested, if you're passionate about the city and you got some issues you want to bring up, That's the way to do it. Put your name out there, and we'll talk, and we'll get you on the program here to let you talk about why you should be allowed to serve. Okay, you mentioned, we got another call, so let's get to the callers. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine with Mayor Vruwink.
Thank you. I was wondering what the mayor thinks of possibly losing the mill here.
Okay.
Is there any troubleshooting?
Okay. Were you listening?
Bring in business.
Okay. Were you listening to at the beginning of the show, ma'am?
No, I wasn't. I just caught it in the car as I was coming home.
Okay. Well, we had an announcement regarding that, and there's been a lot. Like I said, and this is a perfect example, Your Honor.
Right.
This is it was explained the document that they filed.
So Monday morning they filed their SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
This is Verso.
Because they're a publicly traded company, they have to publicly file that. And so Carl actually read an announcement from their local PR representative, Phil Hartley, indicating that the Wisconsin Rapids Mill is not of consideration. And as we talked actually at the beginning of the show, it's probably, if not one of the most strong operations that Verso has in its lineup, and it's because of the integration with the pulp and paper, the pulp production. Otherwise, in places like Androscoggin, Maine, where it's very difficult to reach, they've got to ship those raw materials very far, and they don't have necessarily the integration like we have, or the newest paper mill in the country, or the newest paper machine, in the country.
Ma'am, what they're looking at is debt restructuring and possible sale of some mills, and the only local mill that was on the list is Stevens Point.
Right, but that still affects us.
Sure, it does.
People that go to work to Point?
Yeah, right. But ma'am, this is not imminent. What we were trying to get everybody to take a deep breath. This isn't something that is imminent. This is something they had to say, this is something we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, we know that they're straddled with a lot of debt, right? And between the acquisition process in which in which Verso bought NewPage, they acquired a lot of debt that they didn't have previously, and it makes sense, just like as I mentioned in the household analogy, right? If you have too big of a house and you don't have the income to pay your mortgage, you've got to figure out if you're going to sell that asset and maybe downsize or pay for it in some other means. It's no surprise to me, frankly. I've been watching their SEC filings for months. They've been saying that they're very low on cash, and they're going to continue to be low on cash because they've got so much debt obligations that they need to make good on. And so it makes sense that they would want to shutter or sell another mill. And it makes sense at Stevens Point, because Stevens Point makes a very different product than Wisconsin Rapids and other mills.
Well, then it usually starts at the top. There must be some bad management going on there, and I hope our management here doesn't,
I don't think it's bad management, man, so much as the paper industry.
Well, and I would say just a comment about the local management. I have kept in close contact with the mill manager here, and I'll tell you, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I'll restate my comment. He and his wife are vested in this community. They're not here just to fulfill a short mission of I'm going to run the Rapids Mill and we're going to do what we can. But he's very much a steward of that mill and a steward of the mill's assets. And I'll tell you, that's an attitude I have not heard in most recent mill managers that our paper mill has had in this community. So I'm very pleased, and I think that attitude, and he's got a military background. He believes in the team and the employees that are working at that operation. He very much thinks that team can carry out not only to make that mill survive, but to make it thrive. And I think that's something you don't hear other mill managers saying, and in the past that we've had in this community, and I'm very proud that we have the one we have, and trust in his leadership to turn and to continue to make that mill thrive.
Is there any way they could add more help or expand in our community?
It's a great question. As you may have heard on the radio, not on this show, I don't think, but they're running radio ads for maintenance help from $21 to $29 an hour. I mean, those are really good paying jobs that they're trying to recruit to fill positions. So we need to make sure that we've got the workforce here that can take those jobs, because ultimately they're going to be spending that money right here. And it's nice to see them not just eliminating positions through attrition, but also filling those positions when they're vacant, and recognizing that, hey, you've got to maintain the asset you have or it won't be an asset anymore.
Oh, sure. But kind of comes down to they're building more retirement homes, and we don't have much of a tax base anymore.
Well, the mill has been our dominant tax base, and until we continue to replace it. But let me tell you, those retirement homes pay just the same taxes that you and I do, and really, we're going to continue to see more development in the retirement home space, and I don't think it's a bad thing. Not to say that that's where we're putting our eggs in that basket. That's just going to happen naturally.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah. Well, it's something that I care deeply about, that it's not something we're going to just focus on. But as long as that stuff happens, people can retire here and stay here with their family, as opposed to weathering and moving someplace to the south. I mean, they're going to keep spending their income here, whatever that may be, and their retirement here, and I think that's a good thing. But we certainly, that's on the other end, that's going to open up opportunities for home sales, right? As people move out of their homes to maybe a senior facility, that's going to open up
if the people have got their jobs left.
Correct.
Well, there are people working, ma'am. Not everybody is unemployed.
No, I realize that. Okay. I realize that, Carl, but it just seems like this poor town is just kind of going downhill, and I don't want to see that to happen.
No, well, I appreciate
place.
The comments. Thank you. Yes, I had agree.
All right, I'll let you go.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah, I don't think, that's one of the attitudes I think we got to get. We're going downhill. It's this manic depressed attitude about this area. Mm-hmm. And everybody from you to various foundations to business leaders to the heart of Wisconsin have been trying to change that. Mm-hmm. But it looks like it's not being changed. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't say it any better, and I think, any opportunity I have to speak with a reporter from Bloomberg, based in Chicago, or the Wisconsin State Journal. I was also in on Sunday when we talked about the Oscar Mayer shutdown, that there isn't a place in Wisconsin that hasn't seen a downturn in manufacturing, and unfortunately, this state has been such a strong manufacturing state, and as these companies continue to buy themselves and look for the dirty word synergies, which I think MBA schools and others should stop teaching how to find synergies, because ultimately, that means cuts, right? It means ways to reduce cost, and ultimately that means job losses. So, something I'd spoken with the State Journal is that there is life after a downturn, and we're experiencing in this community. It may not be as quick of a turnaround as we'd like to see it, and believe me, showing up every day to work at City Hall, there isn't anything more sort of challenging than wishing things would change quicker.
Okay, I want to get one more caller in before we have to wrap things up. You're on the air with the mayor.
Good morning. Yes, this is Betty, and the lady just mentioned something about retirees and so forth, and I would be most happy to meet with her and tell and show her just what we add to the economy of Wisconsin Rapids and the surrounding area. We were retired, but you still buy groceries, you still buy clothes, you take care of your car, you go to local plumbers, service stations, and so forth. I get a little perturbed when they say retirees are not adding to the economy. You'd be surprised how much we do. I added it up one day, and it's a chunk of change, and most people do the same thing. So don't sell us short. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for the comments.
Bye.
It's absolute truth, right? It takes a whole community, all generations to make a community.
Quickly, we had this talk about code enforcement.
Yes.
The flip side of that is something you and I talked about, and you've heard it before. Someone might say, yeah, well, I would love to go do some work on this property. I don't have the money for it. Mm-hmm. This economy is enabling me to do that. Right. That's the other side of the argument sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. I talk to kids frequently, and just yesterday I was talking to kids at Vesper. And their basic question is, how can I help the community, or how does the community help itself? To the resident that may be looking at that parked car for the last year, and maybe if it's the case where they can't afford it, sometimes taking up a little collection or helping your neighbor out and saying, you know what, I'm going to haul that car out of there for you, just because it's going to be that much of a difficult thing for you to afford or set you back. I hear those stories frequently, and I think as a community, we're a fantastic community, and we help each other. And sometimes that's what it takes, is to say, you know what, you got a lot of trash in your front yard. I'm going to help you get rid of it, and that just might turn the corner.
The First Ward
That's right.
program. Look at what they did.
It's not about enabling people. It's how do you help them step out of what they might be in.
Yeah. The good neighbor policy, I think, is what it was called. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I thank all of the callers. It was good to get some phone calls today. And again, if you're really passionate about city issues and this community, get involved. Go get some nomination papers and circulate them and put your name on the ballot in the spring.
That's right.
And then let's start the dialogue.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Your Honor, I'm going to wish you and your family and everybody at City Hall a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, and safe hunting if you're hunters out
That's
there.
right. All you hunters out there, be very safe and get that deer so I don't get it with my vehicle. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR, as well as RCCA Media.